What is the EPA's relationship with Monsanto?
Well, what we've seen in the documents, again, is that there are a few people, at least, very highly placed people, who've been working inside the EPA who are very close to Monsanto. Monsanto talks about, one gentleman in particular, a guy named Jess Rowland, who was in charge of the cancer review of glyphosate. And they talk about their friend Jess, and they all know Jess and how helpful Jess can be to them. And when Jess is going to retire and that sort of thing. And we know that Jess, after he did retire, after he gave glyphosate, a clean bill of health essentially in his cancer assessment that found no likelihood that this could cause cancer. We know that he went to work for the chemical industry and has been making some money from the chemical industry. We don't know who, and we don't know what he's specifically doing, but he has had to admit in legal papers that he's doing work for the chemical industry. And you see that, again, it's sort of a revolving door, and we've seen that with a lot of players inside the EPA. We've also seen, as I lay out in my book, evidence of EPA officials who have worked on Monsanto's behalf to make scrutiny of glyphosate go away. I lay out a story in Whitewash about another agency that was going to look at the toxicity of glyphosate. Monsanto did not want them to do it. They went to the EPA, their buddies, and said, hey, can you basically help us get rid of this? We really don't think this should happen. And EPA officials jumped into action and spoke to this other agency on their behalf, and it went away.
Why does the USDA test thousands of foods for pesticide residue, yet they don't test for glyphosate?
So if you ask the USDA, which I have many, many times, they'll say, first of all, we know it's really safe, so who cares if we test it? They say it's really hard to test for it. And they'll say, their resources could be spent better on other things. Now, in 2014, the Government Accountability Office took the USDA to task in a report and said, you have not been testing for glyphosate. You need to do that. You're shirking your public responsibility. You test all these foods for all of these other pesticides, but not glyphosate, so you need to do that. The USDA, I found out through Freedom of Information documents, I found out that they were scheduled to start testing, very limited testing, for glyphosate in 2017. It was supposed to start April 1st of 2017. I had a story all ready to go. I was very excited about it. And then they mysteriously killed the project. Haven't been able to find out a really good reason why. The explanation that I got publicly was resources could be better spent elsewhere. So they're still not testing for it. The FDA similarly spent decades skipping any testing for glyphosate. They also got kind of called out by our Government Accountability Office. They did start testing in 2016, but very, very limited testing. And one of their chemists found some unappetizing results, found glyphosate in honey and oatmeal and other things, and they got rid of him. They told him to get off of any pesticide residue testing. So they're really not doing it in any sort of robust way at the FDA, and they're not doing it at all at USDA.
How do you test your own urine for glyphosate?
Well, I don't do it, and I don't think you could do it, but there are several organizations, groups and academic, players who do offer testing. There are some scientists who've just been tracking people that they'll take the urine samples and get the results, and they track it and put a database together of that. But yeah, there are many different options now for consumers in the United States and in Europe as well. You can order a kit and pee in a cup, and send it back to the laboratory, and they'll test it for you.
What are Freedom of Information requests, and how have you used them to learn new information and educate people?
Freedom of Information requests, first of all, FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, is over 50 years old, and it's designed essentially to allow members of the public to see what the government is doing on their behalf, to see the inside of the public business. So we reporters rely pretty heavily on Freedom of Information Act requests, and you do what it says. You make a request to an agency, you lay out what you want, and they are required by law to respond in a relatively short period of time and to provide you with documentation. Now, I think every reporter would agree with me in saying that they always violate the law. Every agency, have yet to encounter one that actually returns the records requested within the time frame as required by law. But they're very overwhelmed as well. They have a very low budget usually, and not a lot of people working, and so it may take you 6 months, it may take a year, it may take 2 years. I've had to sue the EPA to get them to provide documents. It took a couple of years each time. So, but they're really very, very helpful. In terms of, like, for instance, I write about the FDA in my book and the findings of glyphosate in honey and oatmeal. We would never know that if I hadn't gotten Freedom of Information documents, if I hadn't gotten internal FDA reports, because they don't tell the public that sort of information.
You say that the public is not aware that from the Freedom of Information requests you've learned that there's a profound corporate influence, like academic professors who are teaching our young people, writing policy beliefs to our lawmakers, and giving presentations around the world. And in many cases, we're seeing Monsanto wrote papers for them that appear on websites under their name and make the slideshows that appear on the website under their name. You said it's amazing the network of individuals that Monsanto and the chemical industry have built that appear to be independent, not biased, who are really in collaboration with the chemical industry. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, what I talk about in the book is this network of academics around the world that Monsanto has recruited, in essence, or to collaborate with them to present Monsanto's view of the world. Monsanto, the benefits of glyphosate, the benefits of GMOs, why these things are so wonderful and great. It's essentially a propaganda machine. And we do know that through Freedom of Information requests. And we know it from Monsanto's own internal documents. They talk about the value of a science outreach network, a global scientific outreach network. They say they want to get people to jump up and shout, glyphosate is non-toxic. And they need to get all of these scientists to do it, but they need to do it in a way that nobody knows that Monsanto's connected to them. The organization that I do research for, U.S. Right to Know, was groundbreaking in finding all of these emails from different universities. The New York Times did a big investigative piece writing about this and laying all these emails out, and we have all these emails in a database at the University of California, San Francisco, so the members of the public can see these emails. But some are really egregious. You have a professor in Florida who is talking with Monsanto, and his name and his likeness appears on a website, and there's these wonderful articles and things that he supposedly has written about how great Monsanto's products are, chemicals and glyphosate and seeds and all this. And you see in the documents that he didn't write all of that. Monsanto's PR people wrote that. You see Monsanto talking to him about slideshows and different things he can do, and sending money to his program at the university for him to use. None of that was reported. You see him telling them where to send it so that it won't have to be publicly reported. I mean, it's just a whole network where money is changing hands, and these scientists are going out into the world and acting like they're speaking independently when in fact they are speaking on behalf of Monsanto. And, again, it's the duplicity that is the problem. If these scientists really do believe in what they're saying and believe that Monsanto is saving the world, that's fine, but you need to disclose, you need transparency, you need to disclose, I worked with Monsanto on this presentation, I got the slide deck, or this video was put together by Monsanto. There needs to be truth and transparency.
Who is Henry Miller, who wrote for Forbes magazine, and what did he do, and what was the problem?
So Henry Miller is a perfect example of you know, the hidden hand, the corporate playbook, ghostwriting. He had articles that were published in Forbes magazine. Some of them, you know, came out and were designed to try to discredit IARC and talk about the safety of glyphosate, this chemical, and how, you know, wrong these scientists would be, anybody would be, to think that glyphosate could be harmful. And, you know, it's published in Forbes magazine under his name, and he, you know, has a good track record and, you know, looks like an authoritative individual. But what we see in the documents is that Monsanto essentially wrote some of those articles that were in Forbes magazine. So, and that was somewhat scandalous because when it came out, of course, it undermines the credibility of the magazine as well as Henry Miller. So they made a statement and pulled his articles from the website. And I don't believe he's allowed to write for them anymore.
Why did you have to sue the EPA?
Well, the law requires agencies to respond within a certain number of business days. And the EPA, you know, is sort of notorious for not doing that. So you give them a leeway, and you expect as a reporter that maybe you won't get it in 20 days or 30 days, but maybe you'll get a response in 60 days, or maybe it'll take 90 days, or maybe it'll take 120 days, you know. But when a year or so goes by and they're refusing to even give you one document and they're not being helpful and there's no progress made, you know, you might need to file a lawsuit. And that's what I've done a couple of different times, you know, and then they give you the documents and then they pay your attorney's fees and then you move on.
Why aren't media outlets like the New York Times helping you get the truth out?
I think they are. I think a number of media outlets are very committed to, you know, truth and transparency. I mean, that's sort of the bedrock of journalism. You know, there are a lot of good reporters trying to do a lot of good things out there. I am different now because I have the luxury of time. Now that I'm no longer at Reuters and I'm working for a small nonprofit and I'm, you know, writing books, I can spend hours and hours and hours on freedom of information requests and poring through thousands of pages of documents. And, you know, I have the luxury of being able to really dive deeply in, and some news outlets do not. You know, but many do, and you're seeing really good reporting from many outlets in Europe, and as well as the New York Times and you know, many others. So there's not a lot out there, but there's some.
Do farmers want genetically modified crops and the chemicals that go with them? If they don't like it, why do they keep buying it?
Well, I think you've just answered your own question. Obviously, if farmers didn't find value in these products, in these crops and chemicals, they wouldn't buy them. When I first started reporting on this in the 1990s and would go talk to farmers about these new wonderful Roundup Ready crops, I mean, they loved them. It made their job so much easier. You know, treating weeds became much easier for them. Now, you know, fast forward to today, you go talk to some of those same farmers and it's not so easy anymore. They've had to use a lot more glyphosate. It's not doing the job. They're having to do other products. I've talked to some farmers who are still using the Roundup Ready system, but they're also having to start tilling their fields again, which was one benefit of the Roundup Ready system. Supposedly you didn't have to till your fields. But, you know, farmers over time have sort of lost their interest and skill level in navigating Mother Nature. Weeds and insects and disease can all be handled without pesticides or with a very reduced amount of pesticides. There are different things you need to do, cover crops and crop rotation, and a whole array of strategies that farmers could use, and many of them do. But I think once you get into a system, you know, you just keep doing the same old thing, and that's what you see from many farmers. But you also do see many farmers who are moving away from the Roundup Ready crops, the GM crops, and the pesticides that are designed to be used with them. And they are realizing that's not sustainable, and they're coming up with other strategies. So, you know, you're seeing a shift. They call it transitioning. Farmers are transitioning in many parts of of the world.
How many companies control the seed and chemical industry, and what are the concerns if there are only a few companies controlling them?
Yeah, well, there really are only a handful. You know, you've had consolidation over many years, and you've had a whole rash of consolidation just in the last couple of years that put together really giant companies like Syngenta and ChemChina and Dow and DuPont and, of course, Monsanto and Bayer. So you really have had a very dramatic consolidation, leaving control of seeds and chemicals used in agriculture in a very few and very powerful corporate hands. Regulators, you know, are supposed to look out for this sort of thing, monopolies, and they're supposed to ensure, you know, adequate competition. There are many farmers and consumers and others who fear that this lack of adequate competition is going to lead to, and has been leading to, higher prices, you know, for seeds and less diversity in the types of seeds that are offered. You know, and the same thing could be said for chemicals. So there's some real concerns in farm country about what it means for the prices that they're going to have to pay.